Well, with your materialist blinders suddenly gone, as you put it, you saw neuroscience and neurosurgery in a very different light. You write that you no longer settled for the stock answers that many scientists have naively accepted for so long. How did it affect your career and your research to do such a 180?
Well, atheism and materialism are really handicaps in science because you restrict yourself to a very narrow set of causes and a very narrow way of looking at the world. And when you include the idea that the world is governed by a mind, by a rational mind that has good intentions, and it makes a lot more sense of things. And I found my belief in God and my realization of the fact that the universe is created by an infinite intellect that it's been tremendously helpful. My own scientific research is centered around understanding blood flow to the brain and the interaction with the pulsations of the heart and how the brain reacts to that. And I found that if I take an engineering approach and I ask the question, if this system of the heart and the brain were a design system, how would it be best designed? That has led me to discover a number of very important things about how the system actually works that I would not have discovered if I hadn't had the inference to design in my research. So belief in God and recognition of his beautiful design in the universe is not only important for our personal salvation and our personal understanding of reality, it can be very, very, very valuable for a working scientist.
Yeah. Now, as you departed atheism, you also departed a reductionist view of the brain and the mind. You hold a dualist view. Tell us briefly, for viewers who and listeners who don't quite understand what that term gets to, just define that for us, and also how you define mind, brain, and soul briefly.
Sure. The brain, of course, is an organ, and it does specific things. And the scientific evidence is that basically it does five things. One thing it does is it controls vital functions like breathing and heartbeat and so on. The second thing it does is it controls movement, so it lets you move your limbs. Third thing is it controls perceptions like vision and hearing and touch. Fourth thing is that it controls emotions. So there's a lot of emotional stuff that comes out of brain physiology. And the fifth thing it controls is memory. If we have specific memories, like remembering your grandmother's face, definitely comes from brain activity. There's a ton of science that supports that. But the capacity for reason and for free will, the capacity to think abstractly, not about a physical object, but about concepts like mercy and justice and mathematics and logic, that all doesn't come from the brain. The brain is necessary for the normal exercise of abstract thought, but the brain is not sufficient for it. We have souls, and our souls are what make us alive, and our souls are spiritual. And a spiritual soul has both material things like our bodies and the control of our bodies, and it has immaterial things like, again, our capacity to know God, our capacity to use reason, our capacity to exercise free will.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Now, you push back on the widespread materialist view in neuroscience that the mind is simply what the brain does. In one chapter, you explain that even when the brain is split in half, many important aspects of the mind remained unified. How does this point to an immortal soul?
The immateriality of an aspect of the mind, that is, that the fact, and I believe it is a fact, that our capacity for abstract thought and our capacity for free will are not generated by the brain. The brain helps us express these things and helps us experience them, but it doesn't come from the brain. That immateriality of that aspect of our soul means that our soul cannot die in the same way that our body can. An abstract immaterial thing cannot cease to exist in the same way a material thing ceases to exist. A good analogy to help us understand that is if you think about the number 8. You can choose anything abstract. We'll think about the number 8. There are two ways that the number 8 can be in your experiential life. One way is if you just write the number 8 on a piece of paper. The other way is if you think about the number 8. You're just abstractly thinking about it. Well, if you write the number 8 on a piece of paper, that version of number 8 could so-called die, meaning you could put it in a fireplace, the paper burns up, that written number 8 is gone. But the concept of number 8, the abstract concept, can't die. That is, that there will never be a time when a department of mathematics will announce that, well, yesterday, sadly, the number 8 passed away, so from now on, we're counting from 7 to 9. Meaning abstract things don't disintegrate, they don't fall apart, they don't die. And there's a part of our soul that is abstract, incapable of abstract thought. So that means that our soul is not the kind of thing that can cease to exist, at least not in the sense of dying. So there's very strong evidence, I believe, just from a logical, philosophical standpoint, to believe that the human soul is immortal. And that, of course, was the viewpoint of St. Thomas Aquinas and many of the greatest philosophers and theologians. And there is considerable scientific evidence for that also.
Yeah. Well, I was really intrigued by your chapter asking just how much brain the mind needs to function. You write that while some brain areas are vital, significant portions can be removed or injured without necessarily affecting the mind. What did you learn about the parts of the mind that don't map to localized areas of the brain?
That's probably about half the brain. It doesn't really map to the mind in a clean way. And those areas are commonly called association areas, large areas in the frontal lobes, the parietal lobes, and other parts of the brain. And there are many people who lack those parts of the brain, either because of trauma or because of surgery or because they're born without them. And they're very normal people. They're very highly functioning people. Now, of course, there are many injuries to the brain that cause a lot of disability. So that it's not that the brain doesn't count. It's that there are a number of anomalous situations. A good example was a little girl that I've cared for since she was born, who was born missing half or 2/3 of her brain. A major part of what was inside her skull was just spinal fluid, which is water. And a lot of her brain was missing. And I counseled her family when she was born that, I couldn't be sure how she was going to do, but it didn't look good. And as she has grown up, she's been perfectly normal at every stage of life. And she's a bright young lady. She's in her 20s now. Her mom jokes that she's too smart for her own good sometime. And she's a perfectly normal young lady. If you were to meet her, it's perfectly fine. She's missing 2/3 of her brain. So there's a lot of that goes on. And that doesn't mean the brain isn't important, but it means that we really need to rethink the textbooks, and particularly we need to rethink the materialist ideology, and it's really just an ideology, that the mind is completely caused by the brain. That simply isn't true, and there's a ton of science, there's a ton of personal experience that tells us that's not true.
Yeah, definitely calls that view into question for sure. Well, you have a whole chapter explaining why the immortality of the soul is a reasonable belief to hold. Let's talk about that for a moment. To grasp this, you write that every living thing begins and ends physically, and we need to be clear about how the human soul is different. In the material world, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It's transformed from one state to another. You write that the immaterial world is similar. What does neuroscience and everyday life tell us about the immortality of the soul? I know we've touched on this already, but in particular, you mentioned everyday life. What is it showing us about the duality here?
Well, I think the implications for our lives, if that's what we're getting at, I think is very important, in that if our soul is immortal, and I think there are powerful theological reasons, philosophical reasons, and scientific reasons to conclude that our soul is immortal, then everything we do has eternal ramifications. That essentially things really matter. How we treat other people, how we relate to God, whether we do right or do wrong morally. These are eternally important issues. and it encouraged us to take things very, very seriously. And also, when you deal with other people, you're dealing with an immortal creature like yourself, and that people therefore warrant respect, consideration. It makes us take life and take interpersonal relations a lot more seriously.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one of the things you mention in your book is free will. I've read parts of eminent Stanford professor of neurology Robert Sapolsky's book, Determined, wherein he announces after 40 years of studying humans and primate apes that, quote, we are nothing more or less than the sum of that which we could not control, our biology, our environments, their interactions, unquote. This denial of free will, you say, is probably the majority view among neuroscientists, the idea that we're utterly controlled by our brains. Now, I know that our decisions can be affected by external forces, and because of the power of habit, it can take some doing to introduce surprise into an equation and go against the expected or predicted behavior. But I certainly don't buy the claim that we're not free to choose. What convinced you about free will?
Well, there are four reasons, at least four, to affirm that free will is real. The first reason is that every human being who's ever lived and every human being alive today believes in free will. Even scientists like Dr. Sapolsky actually believe in free will. What you believe is much more than what you say. What you believe is what you do. And everyone lives like free will is real. We experience our lives every day like we're actually choosing. We hold people accountable for their choices. We believe that there is moral law. After all, if there is no free will, there can be no moral law because there's no right or wrong. We're all just meat robots, and a robot isn't blamed or given credit for what it does. It's just a robot. So everybody actually believes in free will. It's just that some people aren't candid about what they actually believe. And that goes to an expression, if I'm not mistaken, it was Carl Sagan, who said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And the claim that free will isn't real, when every human being lives his or her life as if free will is real, is an extraordinary claim. And it requires extraordinary evidence, and we don't even have ordinary evidence that free will isn't real, let alone extraordinary. So that's one reason why free will is real, is that everybody knows it's real. The second reason why free will is real is that the denial of free will is self-refuting. That if you say that nothing I do is by my choice, everything is imposed upon me, then even your opinion that free will isn't real isn't your choice. It's imposed upon you. And if it's imposed upon you, why would we trust it? It's forced by your brain chemistry. Why would you ever think that would necessarily be true? So the denial of free will is basically saying, I'm just a robot. And my answer is, then why would I listen to what you say? The third reason to believe that free will is real is that free will denial is based upon the belief in determinism. Determinism is the idea that everything that happens in the universe from moment to moment is determined by the state of the universe just before it happens. And that theory is now pretty much completely disproven. There's a physicist named Alain Aspect from France who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, along with two other physicists that he worked with, for actually doing experiments that have shown that what's called local determinism is clearly not true. That is, that there's room for free will in quantum dynamics, in the way the world works. Free will has plenty of room to work. The fourth reason to believe that free will is real is that there's actually a lot of scientific evidence that supports the inference to free will, evidenced by a neurosurgeon named Wilder Penfield and by a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet. So there's a ton of reasons, at least four solid ones, to support the idea that free will is a very real thing.
And do you find that when free will gets denied in your fields, is it more to do with a commitment to methodological naturalism and materialism, or is it somehow people are afraid that it's going to get connected to a religious view? What do you think? Why do you think they find it convenient to deny it?
Well, I think both of your explanations are right on target. Many people in the scientific world have a commitment to a materialism. Exactly why that is a whole other question. some of it is just moving with the herd. If you express immaterialist views as a scientist, people look at you askance. Unfortunately, to kind of go along, to get along and get grants, you got to kind of play the game. So that's part of the reason. The other part of the reason, I think, is that the denial of free will and the endorsement of materialism is kind of like a virtue signaling thing. It's a way people have of saying, you know, look how committed I am to the cause of materialism. I don't even believe in free will. I think it's, as I said, it's self-refuting. It's bad science. It's terrible ideology, and it's just wrong.